In this episode of Goulet Q&A, I'm finally back from being sick, and I talk about the inks that everyone should have, how I rotate through such a big pen collection, and my favorite part about my job. Hey everybody, Brian Goulet here. Goulet Q&A episode number 113. This is in March now. The last time that I did a Q&A was February 12th. And I gotta say, it's been a heck of a last couple of weeks. I had strep throat, and then my daughter had walking pneumonia at the same time while Rachel had a cold. So we were out basically that whole week. That was that first week that I missed Q&A. I recovered from strep and I was ready to come back and do Q&A, but then I got walking pneumonia, thanks to my lovely daughter. Thankfully, both my kids are healthy. And then literally the next day, Rachel gets strep. So she's actually been out for nearly an entire week now. And I am finally recovered, for the most part, from the walking pneumonia, and I'm back here recording Q&A. So it's a little bit different because I feel a little out of practice. I'm sorry that I've been absentee for the last couple of weeks, and I'm sorry that I didn't have a good way to give you notice about that. But that's kind of the hard thing about doing YouTube. I can't really give an update so easily. On top of that, yesterday as I was working on my computer, my screen just went completely blank. I had to troubleshoot with the Apple people about that. And my computer's 3.5 years old. And apparently, like, the exact window when I bought my computer, there was some possible issue with the logic board and stuff like that. So it is now in for repair for the next 3 to 5 days. So I am working off my phone, and I got a replacement computer, but I got to set it up with all my email and programs and stuff like that. So, you know, just haven't really been able to catch a break these last couple of weeks. So it's been a little crazy. If I'm talking a little funny, it's because I got a cough drop in my mouth because I don't want to get into a coughing fit. I'm not 100% better, but I'm like 95% better. So anyway, I'll be working off my phone. So I had like literally prepped for this Q&A and everything, and then I lost it because it was on my computer. It's one of the few things I didn't have backed up. So I had to write it all over again, my notes. So hope you guys appreciate this. I was so bound and determined to get a Q&A out. I was like, friggin' darn it, I'll just wing it if I completely have to. But I was able to pound some notes out, so that's kind of cool. So anyway, let's go ahead and kick it off. Pens and writing questions. Oh, wait, before I get into all that, sorry. Lamy Dark Lilac is coming, so you may have seen that. It's our most liked Instagram photo of all time. That's pretty cool. We got some other stuff. The Homo Sapiens Dark Age is going to be coming really soon, I think next week, so that's pretty rad. The Dark Lilac is going to be coming like early April. I don't have an exact date on that yet. Got some samples of the Pilot Decimo, so we're photographing that. I'll shoot a video on that pretty soon. That'll be coming later in May, but those are pretty exciting, gotta say. And there's just all kinds of other stuff we got going on too. You know, we'll have a special Dolcevita Masterpiece with gold trim. We'll have that coming pretty soon. Still waiting for kind of those to all come in. A lot of other things that are in the works. Delta Unica, matte black, sold really well. We're gonna have more coming in probably in the next 4 weeks or so. They have to make more. They just sold faster than we even thought, so that's pretty cool. But anyway, so that's kind of it for products. I'm sure there's some that I'm missing, but again, I lost all my notes, so forgive me there. You can just ask in the comments and I'll update you on whatever I have if you're curious on anything. So to kick it off here, I actually had a question from Instagram, of all places, from CSF_photo on Instagram, and asked, how do I store spare nibs? Do I just throw them all in a bag and hope they don't get damaged? And what about nibs that have a black finish? Won't they get scratched? Yeah, so you know, the honest truth is, if you want to know the dirty details, when we receive large quantities of nibs, we receive them all in a big bag. That's how all the manufacturers ship them, pretty much. Lamy, when we get spare nibs, will often do them in these little plastic cases. Like, forgive me, I'm going to be probably grabbing a lot of things out of here. So Lamy has these little plastic boxes that have like a cardboard cutout that the nibs kind of fit into. but they're pretty rare in doing that. Most of the other nibs just come loose. But Pilot Vanishing Point nibs, they usually come in a tray, so they're not just flopping around. But pretty much all the steel nibs, yeah, they just kind of clang into each other. And honestly, it doesn't really do any damage. Every now and then we'll see a scratch with the black nibs, and we'll bottom shelf it, or we'll just use it internally or something like that. But those nibs are pretty tough. The steel ones, they're pretty tough. Unless you're like crushing them or squishing them or rubbing them together really hard, but just like in normal kind of in transit, they're not really clanging into each other very much. You know, and if it's like a polished steel or something like that, you can use a jeweler's cloth and kind of buff that thing right out, and it really doesn't cause any like real damage. Definitely doesn't cause like misalignment or anything like that. You know, again, unless you're crushing them, which honestly, no matter what you did with that, it would be pretty bad. So I would say if you have a collection of spare nibs and you're looking to really take care of them, you really only need to worry about it if you're transporting them somewhere, or if you just like to have a better way to have them organized than just having them flopping around in a bag. Like here, I've got black Goulet nibs. These are my personal ones. They're just kind of hanging out in a bag. So I store a lot of things in bags, and it really doesn't cause too much harm. I mean, it can, again, but generally speaking, it doesn't. So if you wanted to be more careful with it, you certainly could. You could adapt any type of little container. You could fill it with like a foam type thing. There's like different, you know, materials you can get at art stores that are like kind of a dense foam that you can do, or like things that are made for like fake potted plants and stuff like that you could line it with, or sponge, or like anything kind of soft that you could cut into and just kind of stab a nib into it would work pretty well. That would work. I don't have like a good nib storage system. I get some of those things from Lamy, but not a lot, not enough to sell with any type of regularity. So before you go asking me there, I don't have any spares. Yeah, so I would say those are some ideas there, but you don't really need to sweat it too hard. Maybe the black nibs, you want to be a little more careful with them just so they're not getting too banged up. But for the most part, you don't need to worry about it. And then the other thing is for Vanishing Point nibs, if you've ever bought a Vanishing Point nib from us, we do protect those extra when we're shipping them. And honestly, most spare nibs, unless it's like a $2 Noodler's nib, we'll put it into a sample vial, so it's really protected well. You know, for your own storage, you don't really need to sweat it too much. Vanishing Points we'll do in like a long basically version of a sample tube, so helps to protect that because that's a more expensive nib. All right, this question is from Donovan P on Facebook. What do you think, why do you think that colored nibs aren't more popular and only on cheaper pens? So this is an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked this. I don't really know of a lot of pens that even have colored nibs anymore. I know Platinum with their Preppy and the Plaisir used to have colored nibs. So they used to have a colored nib to match all of the pens, but they don't really do that anymore. They got away from that. Now they do colored feeds on the pens, but the nibs themselves are individual. Probably they just did that for economies of scale, because trying to keep track of all those different nibs and stuff like that was probably pretty hard, and keep them with regularity. We would be out of certain colors of pens for a long time. So they probably did that just so they could make the nibs more standardized, because I'm sure it's easier to make a colored plastic feed than it is to color all these nibs. So I think part of it is just trying to get the color consistent is somewhat difficult from what I understand with these colored nibs. I know we've experienced that with our own black nibs. To get them consistent is difficult. But then when you get into more colors and stuff like that, it gets to be a challenge. But also I think it's just supply and demand, honestly. I think most people who are into fountain pens tend to be a little more traditional, and the colors tend to be just make something that's already preferential that much more preferential. So it's probably a lot harder to sell something with colored nibs, even though you'd think maybe it would be more appealing, but I don't think for the most part that it really is. So, you know, I just don't hear a lot of people asking about colored nibs, and really aside from the Preppy and the Plaisir that used to be, I can't really think of anything that has colored nibs aside from, you know, two-tone nibs, you know, like gold plating on steel nibs. That's, I guess, a form of coloring. And then going with like a black nib or a matte colored nib, you know, a titanium looking nib. That's really the only kind of colors that I can think that I see with any type of consistency across major brands. So I don't know, maybe it's a huge opportunity out there that manufacturers just aren't capitalizing on, but you know, it'd be good. Maybe you can give me some feedback in the comments about colored nibs if they matter to you, or if there's any that I'm not aware of that have colored nibs. I really can't think of any off the top of my head, but there you go. Okay, cool. Oh, good. My email is actually all caught up. That was Sam. He's our HR guy / IT guy. We have a small company. He said my email's all set up, so that's cool. I should probably turn off the buzzer on my phone. Anyway, cool. That pretty much covers that. All right, John S. on Facebook says, hello, I'm a college student who needs your help. People are always in search of their idea of a springy gold nib to smoothly bounce along with their writing, and well, I don't care. I have to write on copy paper frequently, and I need a nib like a rock to punch through it. People usually ask about soft nibs, but do you have any recommendations for something just short of a nail? Oh, it's funny you mention a nail because that's how most people refer to nibs that are really stiff. They call them nails. Definitely stick with steel nibs. You really don't need to buy gold nibs. You know, you probably aren't shopping for gold nibs really anyway, being on a college, you know, most people on a college student budget aren't buying $150 and up pens. You totally could, it's up to you. But I don't think you need to, especially for what you're looking for. That's part of the advantage of going with a gold nib is gold is softer than steel, so you're gonna get a little bit more springiness and stuff in general when you go with gold nibs as opposed to steel. If you're looking for something super stiff, pretty much any steel nib is gonna help get you there. Not always the case, some have designs so that they have added flexibility, like Noodler's Flex pens, obviously, but like a Platinum Cool has a springier nib. You know, there's like thinner nibs, like even the Pilot Metropolitan is pretty stiff, but you can get a little bit of spring on it if you try. So I would say in general, if you pretty much stick with the less expensive pens, you're gonna get there. I think Lamy has generally got pretty stiff nibs. Faber-Castell as well has stiff nibs. Going with smaller steel nibs is gonna generally be pretty stiff for you. If you're going with a larger nib, it may, just because of the nature of the long length of the nib, you know, going with something with a number 6 size nib is gonna be there. But you know, TWSBI's got pretty stiff nibs. There's really a lot of options for you. You know, unless you're going with something specifically designed to be springier, you're essentially gonna have pretty stiff nibs with most any steel nib pen. One thing I will say is part of the technique of how you hold it too makes a difference. Jinhao might be another good option for you. They're also very cheap. It's got a larger nib on it, and if you hold it at a lower angle, it's going to give more leverage to be springy, but if you're holding it more upright, it's going to write much stiffer. Just even with the exact same pen, holding it at a slightly higher angle is going to make it so that you are writing with a stiffer feel. So that's something else to take into consideration. If you feel like something is kind of springy, check how hard you're pressing, and then check that angle too. Get that angle up higher and you're going to be okay. And then basically when you're writing and pushing down hard and trying to like really press in, going with a broader nib is usually going to be better. The finer the nib you go with, usually the more variation you're going to see in your writing. You got to balance that out, because if you're using, you know, inexpensive paper, it's usually going to be more absorbent. So if you go with a broader nib, it's going to be smoother and write easier as a stiff nib, but at the same time, it's going to put down a little more ink. So you got to kind of balance that out. So, you know, I would think that you could find something pretty good for you in kind of that range. So hopefully that helps you out. Got an ink question here. This is from Cruz H on Facebook. For someone newer into fountain pens, what are the most necessary inks that everyone should have, or that are very popular? I personally am a fan of Diamine Marine, and I've been wanting to get an ink sample of X Feather for school, but you're currently out of stock of it. Thanks, and keep up the great job. Yes, I actually have a bottle of Diamine Marine right here. One of my favorite inks, for sure. Love that kind of turquoise color. So that definitely is a great choice. I have a list that just a short list that I made of things. Certainly, I would love to hear comments about that as well. So, Noodler's Black definitely is kind of a go-to. I think that's, at the moment, that's our #1 selling ink color, period. Edges out maybe a couple others. Noodler's Liberty's Elysium is very close to that. Granted, that's our exclusive. So for us, it's going to be a high seller because you can only get it from us. But even still, I'm going to plug that one because I helped design it and been selling it for years, and it's a solid blue with some permanence to it. So that one is among some of the more popular ones. But Black, X Feather, like you said, Heart of Darkness also right up there as well. I think X Feather is definitely less popular than Black and Heart of Darkness. It goes Black, Heart of Darkness is after that in terms of Black Noodler's inks, and then X Feather is quite a bit lower on the list actually, because it just tends to not be as, you know, talked about. So if you're looking for a good substitute, Heart of Darkness definitely would be a pretty good substitute for X Feather because it also is pretty good at resisting feathering. It tends to flow a little smoother than X Feather. X Feather is a pretty thick ink for the most part, so I think the Heart of Darkness would be a good alternative for you. Going along the Noodler's train a little bit further, I do have a bunch of Noodlers in here, but that's because they make a lot of really interesting inks. Noodler's Apache Sunset. If you're looking for a high shading ink, ooh, that one is lovely. So that one is definitely on the list. And then Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Roses too is a really unique ink. It's a deep burgundy purple kind of color with some nice black tones to it. Really good variation in color, especially if you got any flex or stub nibs. Looks really cool. So that's it for Noodlers. Diamonds got several good ones. Marine is one of my favorites. Ancient Copper is really popular. Oxblood is really popular. I actually prefer Red Dragon to Oxblood. It's a little brighter. Matador is really good, another red, but Oxblood I think tends to be the most popular of the diamond reds. And there's certainly other diamonds as well. I'll have to give a shout out to the Diamond Shimmer-tastic because a lot of people talk about that. It's a very popular color with essentially what looks like glitter in the ink. So it gets very shimmery, very shiny, very interesting when you're shading with it. So certainly pretty much any of those. Golden Sands tend to be really popular. I think Night Sky is pretty cool. There's other good ones. Shimmering Seas is pretty great. So really any of the Diamond Shimmer-tastics are interesting, whatever tends to kind of strike your fancy. Going along with the shimmering inks, J. Herbin has a couple of really interesting ones. Emerald of Chivor and Rouge Hematite definitely are the most popular. Stormy Gray was also very popular when it came out. So that one is a very interesting gray, which you could fit on there. So any of those, those tend to be the most standoutish of the J. Herbins. But I would also say, you know, the J. Herbin, honestly, the Pearl Noir, the black one is really interesting too. Not one of the more popular ones, but as far as blacks that are easy to clean, flows nicely, that one would certainly be in there. And then Eclat de Saphir is really good as well. It's a very bright, vibrant ink. I didn't dare put Bay State Blue as one of the ones that like everyone should use or everyone should have. I think everyone should try that, you know, because it's a very interesting color. You know, but just be aware it cleans up with bleach, so don't use that in a pen that you change colors a lot in because it's kind of a pain to clean out. But anyway, that one's kind of on the list. Pilot Oroshizuku makes some really good ones as well. A lot of the colors are really good, nice, easy maintenance. They're a little more premium, but very interesting. Konpeki is my favorite. Azagao is really popular too, and then Yamabudo is a really interesting kind of magenta ink. So I think those are probably pretty up there as far as my tops. There's definitely a lot of others. I know I left some off this list. I could name you like 40 inks easily, but I'll just try to keep it as brief as possible here. But those are some of the kind of the more standoutish ones, not in any particular order whatsoever there, but I thought that would be an interesting list. So I'd love to hear kind of what are some of the other ones that you have. So got a couple of business questions here. Got quite a few business and personal questions. And again, these are not all questions from like the last week. It's kind of over the last 3 weeks, more so from like 2 weeks ago because I'd really prepped up for last week. So forgive me if I've avoided anybody's questions. I don't know why I just thought to say that now, but forgive me. Okay, so this is from Donovan P on Facebook. Brian, as me and many others respect and value your opinion, have you seen the Pen Economics posts about Mont Blanc's censoring of things on FPN, Fountain Pen Network, and just the general overlording on FPN, your words, not mine? What's your view on the restrictions to the community and Mont Blanc's attitude? Okay, this is a minefield. I'll go ahead and say that right now. I gotta be super careful of what I do here because I'm on good relations with Jonathan, who writes the Pen Economics blog, and I'm on good relations with many of the moderators on the Fountain Pen Network. Fountain Pen Network was honestly just kind of a great place for me to join in the community when I started back in 2009. So I have a good appreciation for everybody's kind of viewpoints and where they're coming from. So for those who don't know the situation, you can go check out Pen Economics and see what is going on there. The crux, I believe, of the issue is Mont Blanc has some stuff about some pens that are coming out or recently came out or something like that. And they got posted on the Fountain Pen Network. Some people commented some things about the fact they didn't like some of what was going on. And Mont Blanc didn't like the fact that people were posting negative things. They asked the moderators to take them down from the Fountain Pen Network, and they did. So people are feeling like there's some over-moderation, I would say, censorship, if you will, and people are really not on board with that. So I kind of understand that, you know. So some things to kind of cover here. I really don't have a dog in this fight, honestly. I was very active in the fountain pen network in my first few years in the fountain pen world. I really have not been active in the last several years. Partly because I just have a lot going on, and partly because I experienced for myself a little bit of that moderation and just kind of didn't really want to step on anybody's toes, so I just kind of pulled back. What I had experienced several years ago, at the time I was blogging very heavily. This was in probably 2011, 2012, something like that. I was blogging very heavily, writing a lot of written blogs and, you know, ink reviews and things like that. I was posting them on my own blog, and I was very aware of some of the rules they had about not like posting 3 sentences about a review and saying, oh, go check out the rest of my blog, basically trying to siphon traffic off Fountain Pen Network for your individual blog. I get that. And self-promoting and things like that. I've always been sensitive not to do any of that stuff. But basically, I was taking the full review, formatting it on the Fountain Pen Network so you could see the whole thing there, creating lots of good content for them, and then just kind of leaving it there and trying to generate conversation off that. They didn't, I guess, found an issue with that because I'm a retailer. So they were taking all of the posts that I was putting in Inky Thoughts and on the, you know, Fountain Pen, you know, main forums and stuff like that, and moving them to like the Market Watch section. Excuse me. And so they were just moving it to a different part of the forum. They weren't deleting it or anything like that, but they were moving it to a much less trafficked part of the forum where it didn't, in my opinion, didn't really make sense for it to be, because I wasn't selling anything per se. I wasn't even self-promoting or pushing it. I was literally just posting a review. But because of I was a retailer, and I guess my signature had my website in it and stuff like that, they felt it appropriate to move it. Okay, but it literally took me like half hour, 45 minutes just to format the blog post into the Fountain Pen Network thing. And I was like, if they're just going to move it to where nobody's going to see it, I'm just not going to do it anymore. And what eventually happened was there was so much going on the Fountain Pen Network in terms of conversation about Goulet. Starting to get coughing here. What ended up happening was a lot of my stuff was getting moved just because, forgive me, a lot of my stuff was getting moved just because I am a retailer, and it was easier to view what my opinion was as being self-promotional, just because there was already so much talk about Goulet going on in Fountain Pen Network. So I really didn't get into it with anybody. I just kind of understood that they wanted to kind of keep things the way they wanted it, and so I just kind of pulled back. So that's really it for me. That's my background with that. I'm actually on great relations with several of the moderators, and I don't keep like super active in touch with any of them. I don't know, excuse me, I don't know the majority of them, honestly. And I don't have any direct affiliation with the Fountain Pen Network, other than we get talked about there a lot and we engage sometimes. But so that's about my extent of it. Definitely have never engaged in any type of conversation about having negative reviews of me taken down or anything like that. As far as I know, everything bad that's been said about me on Fountain Pen Network is still there. You know, with the exception of maybe a couple of times where somebody just really went off the rails and was, you know, essentially slandering. But that, from what I understand, is not the nature of what was going on. And granted, I don't know exactly what went, so to bring it back to the question, I don't really know exactly what went on with the Mont Blanc and all that kind of stuff, because it was all taken down. I never saw the original stuff. But I can understand. So there's that side of things. Like it's a forum. They run the forum. A lot of moderators devote a lot of their own personal time. They just donate their time to moderating the forum. And they have, you know, a tone, a style, a voice, a whatever you want to call it, a community that they're trying to shape, trying to cultivate on that forum. And, you know, other places like Reddit, you know, it's much more open. So Reddit is self-moderated. So people by upvotes and downvotes, the community itself moderates it, which I guess a lot of people really like. A lot of people like having just completely unfiltered, being able to read anything that's posted, and the natural, you know, craziness that can come out sometimes from trolls and things like that on the internet. You essentially read through that, and not too much damage will be done because they'll stick out so bad from just seeming out of place that other people will just call them out and take it off. That said, that's a little bit different approach than what Fountain Pen Network has taken. They tend to a little more heavily moderate things, and that's kind of always been the case there. But I don't think it's necessarily gotten any worse or any harsher than it has in the years of old. But Fountain Pen Network's a pretty old forum in the grand scheme of things. So I haven't been as super active on there recently. Excuse me. Forgive me for all the coughing. Yeah, I'm having to speak a little bit outside my area of expertise because I'm not as familiar as what they've been doing the last 2-3 years probably. But I can say that I think that in general, the massive openness that's happened on a lot of other social media networks has just kind of changed more of the feel, especially for a lot of newer folks, to what the conversation should be. So I think Montblanc is a very old company, very formal company, I think, in terms of how they do their marketing, how they design everything and interact with their customer base. Very, very formal, as opposed to most other, especially newer companies. So their view on the internet in general tends to be a lot more restricted, tends to be a lot more moderated and curated, in that they want to maintain that public image even on a place like Fountain Pen Network. Now, for me personally, I feel like that Montblanc is missing out. That's actually the approach that I'm taking, by kind of intentionally taking down some negative feedback you're getting from people and trying to pretend like it doesn't exist, like maybe those feelings are not valid or shouldn't be public. I think that's a shame that Montblanc is not taking advantage of some of the very raw and open feedback they can be getting from their customers or potential customers. And the reason I say that is because I personally have found tremendous benefit from engaging very openly with my customer base, with the community, even when there are negative things to come about. And I'll case in point, very good public example of this that happened, one older one newer one. But an older one, when we first came out with Noodler's Liberty's Elysium, we were told from Nathan that this was a bulletproof ink. Now granted, several of other bulletproof inks are really, really, really bulletproof, like really water resistant and stuff like that. With Liberty's Elysium, to get a vibrant blue color, there's no like permanent, vibrant, super vibrant blue color. So when you wash it with water, some of the vibrant blue washes away, but there's a deeper blue that stays put and is very bulletproof. So there was a big debate and some controversy that actually came up on Fountain Pen Network, I believe was a lot of it, and my blog and everything, that came up around whether or not this should really be called bulletproof. And honestly, what it spurred me to do was be like, okay, like I totally feel where you're all coming from. Let me talk to Nathan. I went back and talked to Nathan, told him the sentiment that was going on about that. And then, you know, we worked on several different formulations of Liberty's Elysium as an alternate to the original. And I had him make up samples, and then we tested them and all that. And what we found essentially was, due to just the nature of the properties of the ink, we could get something more permanent, but it ended up looking a little bit more like an Upper Ganges blue or a periwinkle or a luxury blue that was a lot less vibrant, but more permanent and just more flat in color. So I put it out there, back out to the community, and you can go back digging into the old blogs from, gosh, I should have looked up when this was. I want to say it was like mid 2013 or something like that. Was it even 2012? It couldn't have been that long ago. That's a long time ago. No, maybe. I don't remember exactly when it was, but just go searching Liberty's Elysium on the Goulet Pens blog, and you'll see some of that. But the Noodler's Liberty's Elysium reformulation. I did some comparisons, and I told everybody, I said, here's the trade-off. Do you want something more permanent, but this flatter in color like this, or do you want more vibrant and just take the compromise? And everybody resoundingly voted for the less permanent but more vibrant color. And then we compromised and called it partially bulletproof, which we hadn't really done before with any of the Noodler stuff. So ultimately, it was more work on my end to go back and do that, but I feel like we came up with a more clear explanation of what was going on. I think that we took what was initially something that was very negative that I could have tried to sweep under the rug and tried to mask over, but ultimately it ended up creating the best product for everyone, and we gained a tremendous amount of respect for the community and showed everybody, opened up a little bit behind the scenes of kind of what goes on, educated everybody as to what was going on, and gained a tremendous amount of trust. And Liberty's Elysium has been one of our best-selling inks ever since. I think partly because I was so open about it. And then a more recent example, now I'm so upfront with some of the shortcomings of things. The Noodlers, sorry, not the Noodlers, but the Goulet Black Nibs that just came out. I shot them. We noticed that there was some color variation. Not deep color variation, but some were a little more of a gunmetal and some were a little bit deeper black. And we literally, Crystal on our team here, literally went through hundreds, forgive me, hundreds of these nibs and counted every single one. She inspects them all, and she's been trained, and her and I have worked together, and Drew and I and her and I've all worked together on these nibs. She literally went through and categorized all of them as to which ones were black, which ones were gray, and all this kind of stuff. She took days to do this, okay? And then we went back and communicated with Yovo and said, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is before we ever released them. This is part of why, if you remember me talking about the nibs for weeks, this is part of why it took so long. Because we had to communicate as to, hey, this is the issue we're seeing, what's going on, what kind of consistency can we expect moving forward. And now Yovo was talking to, different, nib coloring, people. It's black oxide is the process, so I don't know what you call that, oxidizing or whatever. Different people that kind of do that, trying to source out the best source. So when it came time, I basically determined, like, this isn't something that we can fix right away. This is just how they're going to be. So I said, okay, cool. I'll talk about that in the video, and I'll just be upfront. We'll post pictures of the color difference. We'll talk about it very openly and say, this is what you're going to expect. This is our own product with our own name on it. If I had felt that it was so drastic of a difference that it wouldn't have been of good quality, then I would not have sold the product. But I feel like it's enough where I need to be upfront and clear about it, but not necessarily stop from selling the product. Forgive me. I'm still getting over something, as you can tell, and talking continuously like this is pushing me to my limit, but I want to get this Q&A done so bad. So anyway, that's where I stand. Those are two very recent examples where I put my money where my mouth is, quite literally, to be more than open about shortcomings and stuff about my products. And that's, some of these are preferential things, and some of them are just legitimate, things that I understand. There's a lot of preferential things where people are like, just call out me for certain things, and I'm like, look, this isn't your thing. That's fine. As a retailer, I have a lot of different products. If you don't like this one thing, these controversial, like burning red ink that Nathan just came out with, some people are up in arms about that. I'm like, that's cool. Don't buy it. Go buy something. Get something else. There's plenty of other products. Things like that. So. I would say that in general, I understand kind of where Fountain Pen Network is coming from. They want to maintain their own forum, and honestly, they have the right to do that. You also have the right not to participate on their forum. That forum wouldn't be anything if people didn't post on there. So I think that Fountain Pen Network has a commitment to the members of the forum to try to maintain that kind of, integrity that the members have built there. That said, if they start to see a severe drop in membership, that should be a sign to them that people aren't really digging what they have going on. If I were them, I would be listening very intently to the conversation that's going on around this, because I think there's some very valuable input that's coming from both sides. But I wouldn't say anybody's either right or wrong or blah, 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 blah. To me, it's not so black and white like that. To me, it's more just a matter of, everyone is volunteering their time on these forums and just in the pen community in general, and everybody's going to spend their time where they feel that it is most valued. So I think, Fountain Pen Network, there's a lot of people that don't really value the degree to which the moderation is going on, especially, I think people are feeling like, if there's negative stuff that's taken down about a certain brand by the request of that brand, that's probably where the overstepping has come in. I think that's, if I'm honing in on where the crux of that issue is, that's why this has become kind of such a thing. And that's where Penn Economics has really kind of blown up about this. Me personally, I say, you know, it's a voluntary forum. We all volunteer to use the forum and commit to it. It's a free resource to us all. So I will, you know, I don't participate as actively in Fountain Pen Network as I used to, just as I'm sure a lot of other people feel that same way. But still a valuable resource. There's much to be gained there. It's just a matter of how do they want to be represented, and they can choose to run the forum really kind of however they want. So it's all about the terms and conditions they have there and how they choose to enforce that stuff. As for Mont Blanc, you know, I'm not a Mont Blanc official authorized retailer or anything. We've requested it, and they said because we're not a brick and mortar store, they don't really want anything to do with us. So that's kind of unfortunate. I think that Mont Blanc is one of the latter companies to kind of get on the board with kind of the way the internet's going. So I'm hoping that, I mean, Mont Blanc makes some pretty awesome products for the most part. They tend to be a premium price. Their marketing is very hard driving, and worldwide they tend to be, in my opinion, slightly behind the curve in terms of embracing the new way of doing business and what the internet has done. I think they have a lot of opportunities to really seize that, and I am probably not too far off the mark in saying they're going to lose some market share. They're going to lose some newer customers because of you know, some of the ways that they're kind of closing the conversation about what's going on with their products. But again, they're free to run their company however they want. Not everybody has to have anything to do with it. Those companies that tend to be more closed like that tend to not bring in as many new people, but that's really up to them. It's totally cool however they want to run their business. But that's kind of just my take on the whole situation without taking too many sides. Hopefully I navigated that well. So I'm going to piggyback off of that question with another fairly touchy kind of minefield of a question. I don't know, I feel like I should take on some harder questions these days, so that's what I'm doing. I feel like maybe because I have a business perspective, I have something to add to the conversation, trying to make these a little more engaging at times, so I'm gonna dive in a little deep on this one too. I honestly debated about answering this next question or not at all. I'm gonna try to navigate this one very carefully as well, because it could be a minefield for me as well. So Juan B on Facebook asks, "Hi Brian, I've noticed for several weeks the Big Data book on your bookshelf." Yeah, here it is, Big Data, okay? Yes, which I'll straight up say I haven't read this yet, but it seemed interesting, so I bought it. Your question, Goulet pens should be getting thousands of customers interactions every day with different touch points in so many areas and platforms, and your database is growing exponentially. Excuse me. My question is, do you have a data and analysis strategy in your company in order to understand the story all this data tells? Looking at the future, the sustainable way of keeping the experience personal and improving it should involve some or a lot of big data and analytics. Will be really interesting if you may elaborate on this. Okay, the reason why this question could be such a minefield is because there's a lot of misconceptions about what big data means. Essentially, big data, I don't know specifically what this book exactly is about. I actually bought this like a year and a half ago. I haven't read it. I have a lot of books on here that I haven't read, and the next question I think actually covers on some of the other books that I have. So I'm gonna give you a little tour in a minute, but big data in general deals with the information that's collected while you're perusing around the internet. Information about your computer, your shopping habits, which websites you visit, et cetera, through various cookies and bots that go around the internet and collect this information. So the reason I'm hesitant to answer this question is because it would be very easy for you to misunderstand things and become super paranoid, but at the same time, this information is already being collected and you are just not aware of it, and you could remain ignorant, and that's fine. But I don't want to scare anybody too much, so I will do my best to try to explain what's going on, realizing that I'm not a techno guru. This is just my interpretation as Brian Goulet as to what's going on. So, again, don't know about the book, so I can't really speak specifically about that one, but I do run a business. I run an e-commerce business. So there's, data that I have access to, customer account information, clearly information that you voluntarily put into my site when you check out and things like that. I do not share that information openly with anybody. And I also am not collecting any more information than what's needed to process your orders. Now that said, there is information that is collected when you are cruising the internet by Google, by Facebook, by lots of different social media platforms that basically anybody who has an Instagram account or anybody that has a Facebook account, there's analytics that are built into all of those different social platforms that show user information data and things like that. Like YouTube, if you have anyone who has a YouTube account, there's a whole analytics section on YouTube that you can look to see how many comments you have, how many followers you have, all that kind of stuff, how many minutes your videos have been viewed, all that stuff. Now, a lot of it gets aggregated, so you don't necessarily know like who everybody is, which is, I think, is an important thing to distinguish, that, that you shouldn't be too overly paranoid on most of the social media platforms because they're only collecting information that you're offering up. What is interesting is when you get onto some of the deeper social platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff like that, if you read some of the terms and conditions of those things, it's pretty interesting, the stuff that they collect and what they legally have the ability to do with that information. So without making you too super paranoid, one of the more interesting documentaries I've seen on Netflix was one actually called Terms and Conditions May Apply. It's a very interesting one around this very topic of basically what do the terms and conditions mean for these social platforms and what is done with this information that we're voluntarily putting into all these platforms when we log into these things. And for the most part, it's not like being sold to black market dealers and all that kind of stuff, but it's more just like, this is all information that's being collected for various reasons. And as long as you're on the up and up, you're okay. But there, it's not a super big secret that if you're a criminal and you have a Facebook account and you're posting your whereabouts and locations, the local police departments and FBI and stuff like that will collaborate with the social media platforms to try to track you down if you're a bad person that needs to be tracked down. So, you need to have somewhat of an awareness of what information could be collected as you're perusing about the internet. Because I think to be completely ignorant of that, you may end up doing something that you don't want to do, or think that there's more anonymity and security than perhaps there could be. So look at the terms and conditions. Granted, most of them are so ridiculous and large and stuff like that, but there's actually some sites out there, it's failing me right now as to what some of them are, but they'll actually compile a lot of the terms and conditions and hit some of the highlights of what these different platforms can and can't do based on their own terms and conditions. So people that kind of summarize that kind of stuff for you. So maybe just look around at like terms and conditions summary sites and stuff like that and see if there's any interesting things there. So to tie this back to me, before I do that though, there's a really good quote that I have kind of about social media in general. If you think about Facebook, Twitter, all these different Instagram, all these different social platforms, if you think about them, you're using them for free. They're huge platforms. They have servers, they have developers, they have a lot of different things that have to be done that cost real money to run these things, but you're not paying anything. So there's a really good quote that I have, which I don't remember who it's credited to, but the quote goes, "If you aren't the customer, you're the product." So if you think about that in terms of social media platforms, if you're not paying to use them, you're probably having your information being used in some way to be advertised to. That's what a lot of these platforms end up being. But companies are, have the ability to conglomerate this data and use it to, better basically hone in on you and what your needs are. And so the more like valiant proponents of big data will say, well, by collecting all the information of what you're browsing when you go about the internet, we can find more what is interesting to you and serve up more relevant things to you. So it actually is a good thing in that way. At the same time, it's information that people can use to spam and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like, good and bad both at the same time. So for me, though, as a retailer, I don't have really like big data type stuff like you would have if I was a Facebook or a Twitter or something like that, where I could utilize some of those things is like Facebook and Twitter and all these things. They can hone in on where some of your interests are based on what you've selected and what you do on these platforms, and say like, okay, I want people from this age range and this general locale with these interests. I want to serve them up an ad. That's where the power comes in from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective of having some of this big data. But it doesn't mean that I know who all these people are and stuff like that. There's a curtain of anonymity from me as a person paying for advertising or something. I can't just say, I want to pay a certain amount of money and just get everybody's email address so I can spam them. That's not really what goes on these sites. It's more a matter of, if I want to pay Facebook to serve out an ad to a certain number of people, I can do that and target based on their interest in geography and all these other various things. That's where the information is being used for the most part. So is that a bad thing? I don't really think so. I think it helps, because rather than just blasting out an ad to who knows where, paying who knows how much for people that don't care anything about fountain pens, I can focus on my intention more on people who actually care to see the things that I have to serve up. So I don't even do a lot of advertising, honestly, so which is why this question is particularly interesting, because literally kind of where I'm coming from is I actually feel like I don't use big data nearly as much as I could or even probably should as an intelligent business person. Now, I say that just kind of with a little bit of a chuckle, because honestly, I feel like I run a pretty good business, but I am not a very big data driven person. I have built Goulet pens based much more on the engagement with the community, knowing the products inside and out, and just the conversations I've had with people online. So for me, it's not so much about collecting personal data and sifting through numbers and squeezing every penny out of every unit, moving units to conversions, and just trying to depersonalize and all the techno babble, to try to just maximize my lifetime customer value and blah 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 blah. So like, yes, in order to run a proper business, I need to know kind of generally what I'm doing running a business, and there's probably opportunity for me to be a little more educated about that, which I'm looking into. But for the most part, historically and even very much to today, I focus way more on producing great content, knowing the products really well, making sure we serve individual people really well. And that's really where it stems from for me. So the data that I end up using is just kind of a check behind what I'm already doing to say, like, am I on the mark? Am I really serving people well? Because I believe, rather than like, I need to hit a certain number, what can I do to get that number? I'm viewing it as, I need to serve people really well. After the fact, I can look at my revenue, I can look at how many pens I've sold or whatever, and see, are people really resonating with what I'm doing? And if not, then I should maybe carry different pens or focus on different things, and I use that to adjust kind of after the fact, but that's never really the driving factor for me. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with it. So it's kind of interesting. I know people that are much more into the kind of the techno world deal a lot more with coming to some of the analytics and things like that. Honestly, I don't consider that to be one of my greatest strengths. I consider it to be more just like engagement with the community and knowledge of products and stuff like that. So, I don't know. Hopefully I didn't give off this like Big Brother vibe, but just in general, when you're cruising around the internet, a lot of information is being collected. For the most part, it's nothing really to be too much worried about, because it's happening anyway. If you carry a smartphone around in your pocket, people can find you. It's like there's GPS things in here, and if you're a criminal and you're trying to be found, they can find you. There's lots of ways. So don't be too paranoid about it. If you're a scumbag, then you probably should be more paranoid about it. But if you're a generally upstanding person and don't have a lot to hide, I really wouldn't worry about it too much, But, in general, everybody's got a different level of comfort with that kind of thing. The thing to get across from me as Goulet Pens is I'm really not going after you trying to collect anything that I shouldn't know about you. So don't worry about that. But I am trying to serve you as best as I can. And sometimes, data can help with that, just to tell me if I'm on the mark or not. And that's kind of the approach I take. Gotcha? All right. I feel like I did okay with that one. We'll see. We'll see. It could generate some interesting conversation. All right, some personal questions. This is one from Brittany J on Facebook. Brittany says, I recognize a few of the books on your bookshelf, but some of them I can't make out. What all do you have back there? Okay, so let's take a look. I'm gonna swing around, I'm gonna grab the camera. It's gonna be a little weird because I have my microphone over here, so I'll have to kind of dig that out. But let's see if I can I'm just gonna grab the camera off the tripod and show you kind of what I've got. Okay, this works out pretty okay. So let's go for a little walk, shall we? So I gotta unplug some things. Unplug the power, which hopefully it shouldn't adjust anything too bad. Okay, so here we go. All right, let's see you get off the tripod. All right, here we go. So swinging around. So this is kind of my setup if you've never seen the rest of the room. I have a tripod there. You can see how messy my desk really is most of the time. But anyway, so I just took it off the tripod and we're gonna go take a look at my shelf. So here we go. There's my pen cabinet. Yes, it is a beauty. Lots of pens over there. Okay, so I have several shelves over here. I got my Legos, of course. There's my Lego pirate thing, which my son played with. Now it looks like a war scene, but that's a 6-year-old for you. So some of the books that I have. So I have three shelves filled with books. I have a lot of books at home too, probably a dozen or so that I'm kind of in transit right now. The ones on the bottom shelf here are ones that I have not yet read for the most part. Those I have. And then all these ones up here are ones that I've read. Sometimes I have multiple copies, but I'll just kind of browse through and show you what I've got. Gary Vaynerchuk, Crush It. Huge fan of that book. That's the reason I shoot videos. Jim Collins, Good to Great. Solid business book. Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper. It's a religious book. Kind of interesting. Read that one based off a friend's suggestion. Start With Why. Fantastic book. Great business book. Recommend that to anybody. Dave Ramsey, On Straight Leadership, has been really influential for me in the way that we do a lot of things in the company. Dave Ramsey, Total Money Makeover, that's more of a financial book, which kind of is based off his Financial Peace course, so it's kind of interesting. Thrive by Arianna Huffington. That was a very interesting book, very kind of holistic, covers a lot of different areas, so that was pretty good. 80-20 Principle, I didn't really read that one all the way through. It was kind of okay, but it dragged on for certain parts, and the principle is pretty simple to understand. Just basically 80% of the benefit you get comes from about 20% of the work you put out. And it's kind of a general 80-20 rule for a lot of things that go on. Most businesses, they make 80% of the revenue from 20% of their products and so on. Patrick Lencioni, The Advantage, big fan of that one. Love that book, really, really good. Check that one out. Lead with Humility. This is an interesting book. It's actually written by a Jewish rabbi, I believe, and then it's about the Pope Francis. I'm Catholic, if you didn't know that. I don't really brag about that too much, but so I thought that was a really interesting read, definitely from, just talks about leadership in general and how his humility approach, as somebody who's not even Catholic. It's really interesting. So The Power of Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale, nice classic business book there, really good. Great Leaders Grow. Actually, I think I kind of blew through that one. I don't remember much about it. It was okay. It was by Ken Blanchard, who also did, was it The 1 Minute Manager, I think? Yeah, I think he did that one, but kind of interesting. Daily Drucker, Peter Drucker. It's just a daily book about some Peter Drucker principles. Pretty dense. I haven't been looking at it daily, but it's interesting. The Complete 101 Collection by John Maxwell. So it's got Leadership 101, Relationships 101, a lot of different 101 things. It's a huge book. I've read through most of it, probably about 5 of the 8 books there. Really good though. Let's see here. The Spirit of the Letter and Painting. That was a book sent to me by a customer, actually. Haven't looked at it too much, but it's interesting. It's just got a bunch of paintings about letters and writing and stuff like that, so that's kind of cool. Beginner's Guide to Calligraphy is just a book that Rachel had actually gotten when her and I were getting married, before we even got into pens. I got some Dilbert books, which my mother actually just gave back to me. I was into them when I was like a, middle schooler, high schooler, and she gave them back to me. They're kind of interesting. Kingdom Calling, that was a book given to me. It's a religious book. It was given to me by a friend, and I have not yet read it, so it's actually on the wrong shelf there. Entree Leadership again. 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, really good John Maxwell book. Highly recommend that one. Who Moved My Cheese? Great short little story, kind of a very principle-based book. Boundaries for Leaders, really good one by Dr. Henry Cloud. Got several copies of that because I've given that to all the leaders in our company. Really good. Thou Shalt Prosper, a very dense book by Daniel Lapin. Interesting, he's a Jewish rabbi who's wrote about kind of business principles, so kind of interesting there. QBQ, really, really good book. I actually have several copies of QBQ down here, so I would recommend that one too. Anybody has a nice motivational one. It's about personal accountability. So that's a nice, interesting one. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. I'm actually listening to the audio version of The 8th Habit, his follow-up book to this. So really solid, recommend that. There's Entrepreneurship Leadership again. This one's kind of interesting. It's a book on quotes called Get Stuff Done. Just a lot of short quotes from a lot of techno people, a lot of just, newer business folks. Just very simple quotes that are really kind of blunt and funny. Business Secrets of the Bible is another Daniel Lapin book to follow up Thou Shalt Prosper. Also very, very dense, but interesting read. More Pat Lencioni. The E-Myth Revisited. This is a really good book. Really, really good book for anybody who's started a business or looking to start a business. Recommend that for anybody. It's very solid. Strength Finder 2.0. If you've ever taken a Strength Finder test or heard of it, this book just kind of explains that. Really good, by Tom Rath. Worked for the Gallup company. Very interesting. Business for the Glory of God. This is kind of a business/religious book. It's pretty good. Not one of the most solid ones, but it's a solid read. Seth Godin, The Dip. This is a really good one. Actually, one of the more influential ones for me because Seth Godin has written a ton of books. And I actually have one of his more ridiculous books up here on the top of my shelf called This Might Work. Huge book. You can see how big this book is up here. Very, very, very large. I got that when I went to Business Gets Personal. He gave that to everybody there. So that was kind of cool. But very interesting. Oh, this one is really interesting too. Antique Boxes, Tea Caddies, and Society. Interesting book, but it has a lot of antique writing boxes on it. It's a kind of expensive book. It's like $90. I got off eBay, but very interesting stuff because for those of you who are in the writing world, because it has all kinds of stuff. And these were like the laptops of the 17 and 1800s. So really kind of cool. Lots of beautiful pictures there. Very pertinent to the writing world. So anyway, Seth Godin was very influential. The Dip was really kind of cool in my early days. Smart Money, Smart Kids, another Dave Ramsey book that he wrote with his daughter about how to raise your kids to be smart with money, as you couldn't tell that from the title. Interesting read, very tactical advice in there. Thank You Economy, Gary Vaynerchuk's second book. Not my favorite of his books, but pretty solid principles in general. Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last. This is a follower to Start With Why, which is a really solid book. But Leaders Eat Last, good read. Jab, 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 right hook. Gary Vaynerchuk's most recent book as of this moment, but he's writing another one called Ask Gary V that's coming out pretty much now. Pretty good, very tactical. Gary Vaynerchuk is just really solid for anybody who's into social media. Delivering Happiness. This is a good one from Tony Hsieh. This is part of what inspired me to define our company values. Tribes by Seth Godin. It's a good one too. Another short little one talks about how basically groups of people that are into things are the future, which is very much like the fountain pen community. What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Marshall Goldsmith, good book there. Pretty dense. Not like a lot of super applicable stuff I got out of that, but it is really interesting. It kind of just talks about how, the approach that you took to get to the point where you are in your business doesn't necessarily mean you can keep doing that as you get to the next level. Poke the Box, another Godin book. Pretty good. Not my favorite of his, but solid book. Okay, now getting to the ones that I haven't read as much so I can blow through them a little quicker. I have read these, actually, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is, I just keep as extra copy for anybody who asks me in our company about it. I just give them a copy. Really good one, just talking about how to relate to people. QBQ, I have several copies of that. I read this in front of my whole company, actually, over a series of weeks in our company meetings. Really solid personal accountability book. John Maxwell, he has lots of nice little books like this. How Successful People Lead, good one. There's Big Data that I just talked about a little bit there. I have a copy of The Cursive Logic, which is kind of good if you're interested in learning cursive or teaching it to your kids or whatever. Solid little book. Pick that up. This is a cool one that was sent to me by a customer. It's called Blue Chicken. It's about a chicken that finds basically blue ink and splatters it around everywhere. Really kind of cool. So a nice little story, but very, very pertinent because it's blue ink splatters and that's our company logo. And that was kind of cool. Thank you to that customer there. How Successful People Think, John Maxwell, another good one. The Personal MBA, have not read this one, but I'm not super academic, but I am interested in educating myself. So anytime I can find anything that helps me to understand better how to run a business, I'm very interested in that. Bergen Protocol, I actually am in this book a little bit. So Kevin Bergen wrote this and included me a little bit in it. So a little plug for him. So you can check that one out. Kind of a motivational speaker kind of vibe, but pretty solid book. 100 Best Business Books of All Time. So literally it's a book about books. I know, it's kind of crazy, but I've got a bunch of these and a lot that I've never heard of before, so kind of interesting. This is kind of interesting. It's a Ben-Hur, but Thomas. It's got Thomas More. So the guy who did the artwork for this did it with Goulet products. So this is actually artwork done by a customer. So he sent me an autographed copy of the book, which is kind of cool. John Maxwell, 5 Levels of Leadership down here. Very, very solid book. Love that one. I have multiple copies of it. I'm studying it at home right now. Very solid for anybody who's in leadership. Double Double by Cameron Herold. Haven't read this one all the way through yet, but I actually got to meet him at a keynote speech that was done at a conference I was at. He's a pretty solid guy. Was the operational, COO at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. So pretty big business there. Wayne Mullins has, so you have a website now, what? And wrote about Goulet in this book. So that's kind of cool. Whenever anybody uses anything for a book that includes us in it, I always try to ask for a copy of it and plug it a little bit. Pathway to Profit. This is Anita Pugh, Carolyn Hipple. So this is somebody who gave a keynote speech that I went to. I bought a copy of her book. Haven't read all the way through it. So that one's interesting. Fred Factor. This talks about really just about having an exceptional attitude. This was really big, several years ago, but it's about a USPS employee actually whose name was Fred that just had an unbelievable attitude. So Mark Sanborn wrote about him. Haven't read that yet, but I've heard a lot of good things. Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. This is Stephen Covey's son, so the son of the guy who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People up here. But trust is our currency here at Goulet. Speed of Trust I heard is really good. Haven't gotten around to it yet, but it's definitely on my radar. It's never about what it's about. This is by Crandall Krauss. He's actually a customer of ours and sent that. He wrote this book, so he sent the copy of this. Haven't read it yet, Crandall, but I appreciate the copy of it. Forum by Mo Fadlbab. I was in a CEO roundtable, and it's a book about doing business roundtables. So that's his book there. Alan Wurtzel, Good to Great to Gone. Alan Wurtzel is one of the founders of Circuit City, and actually I live in Richmond, Virginia, and Richmond is where Circuit City started. So Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, up here, Circuit City was one of the 15 companies that was good to great, that had exceptional performance, but Circuit City is now clearly out of business. So it just talks about Good to Great to Gone, like why it peaked and then why it crashed. So kind of interesting, a little bit bitter, bitter flavor to it. But anyway, The Decision Book, just a nice little book about how to quickly make decisions, kind of cool. Steve Jobs' Own Words. I haven't read that one a lot, but it seemed interesting. I bought that around when he died, so it seemed kind of interesting at the time. The Leader's Pocket Guide, so just kind of quick little things. I can get little quips out of there. I haven't read a lot of it though. 100 Ways to Motivate Others, seemed kind of cool. Haven't used it a lot. John Maxwell, Winning with People. John Maxwell's written like 80 books. A lot of them really solid, but that's one of the ones that I have on my list. Drucker and Me, Peter Drucker, obviously really influential business management expert, but it's written about somebody who basically studied under Peter Drucker for a year and what his experience was like. And then Strengths-Based Leadership. This is kind of built upon Strengths Finder, the test, but talks about how to use this concept of building upon people's strengths in a leadership way. So, that's a lot. That's a lot of different things going on there, so I appreciate you coming on the journey with me. Forgive me. It's actually after 5 o'clock here now on a Wednesday, so I'm going to need to go pick up my kids soon, so I got to go wrap this up here pretty soon. But I appreciate you coming along the journey with me as I do that. So let me just plug my stuff back in. That way I can be all good in the hood to do things. So forgive me as I'm getting reacquainted with my camera setup here. Okay. Cool. Okay, I think we're still recording. All right, we're good. So, let's go ahead and get this wrapped up, right? So I hope you enjoyed that little tour of my books. I'm a pretty avid reader. I've read over 80 business books in the last 3 years. So I would not consider myself an expert. In fact, the fact that I'm not an expert is why I read so much. All right. Oh boy, I got 2 more questions to finish this out. I am really just making up for lost time. Here we go. Jeremy F. on Facebook asks, hey Brian, with all the multiple and varied tasks that you do on a daily basis, what is your favorite part of your job? Oh boy, I really do have a lot of different tasks that I do. We got up 35 people in our company now, and we're hiring for a couple more. And I will say that part of what I love the most about what I get to do around here every day is the fact that I get to do so many different things. I love the products, I love our people, I love our culture, I love our customers, I love engaging in social media. I really love pretty much everything that I do. That's part of the reason why I love having my own business. Is if there are things that I don't love to do, usually it's because I'm not that good at them, and I will often hire or delegate those things away so that I do not spend my time doing things that I'm not very good at doing. Sometimes I'm just not that great and I need to do it because it's just, managing people. I was not that great at doing it, and I'm still got a lot of work to do, but it is something that I just need to learn how to do. So I will work on self-improvement stuff and learn how to do it better. But that said, honestly, the number one thing that I love doing is just having variety. So a lot of what motivates me, strategic thinking. I just love navigating challenges. I'm very, very much challenge driven. If things are just flat and plain and consistent every day, I get super bored really fast. And I will literally just mix things up because I get bored. So I have to be in an environment that's kind of rapidly changing. Otherwise, I will drive people crazy. So I actually tend to thrive in a rapidly changing environment where there's a lot of dynamic things going on. And just my personality style is such that I was never like a straight A student. I was never like the best, whatever, basketball player or whatever it is. I was never the best at any one thing. I was always above average at just a lot of different things. So for me, being a generalist of sorts, I get to really kind of thrive because I get to pull bits and pieces from all of these various things that I've had experience doing and get to put these random kind of disjointed ideas together into some new approach that nobody's ever thought of. That probably is the single most thing that I enjoy doing the most, is just thinking outside the box. That very much like starting a fountain pen retail business in 2009, coming off of one of the biggest recessions we've ever had, with no money, no experience, and no help really. Rachel and I I say no help. Rachel and I together, no real outside help in that way from experience standpoint. We had to learn it all. Had to learn my own photography, video, blogging, writing, shipping, you name it, everything about this business we had to learn. She had to learn HR, accounting, customer service, all these things. So the two of us together really had to learn a lot. So we've enjoyed that. So I love getting to play with pens every day. I love, getting to know the products. I love getting to talk to our vendors, talk to different manufacturers, and help to influence new products that are brought in. Really love that. Just really everything. I love engaging. I love engaging on comments on YouTube and on the blog and social media, and getting to talk directly with people. It's awesome. I love sitting down one-on-one with people in our company and just talking about what they have going on, and finding ways to help them that they couldn't see otherwise, and challenging them to grow and learn, and sharing some of the things I've read and having that change people's perspective. Really, all this stuff is rewarding to me. I think if I do any one thing for too long of a time, I would get kind of bored. The fact that I get to do so many different things is really what I love the most. So there you go. Last question I have, this is from aceeccc on Twitter. I don't even know how to say that. Aceeccc. Asks, Brian, how do you rotate through all your pens? Your schedule doesn't seem to have much time for journaling, etc. Okay, so I currently have a collection of around 400 pens in my personal collection, which, now that I say that, seems like a lot. It probably is a lot. I never set out to have any type of big collection, and it kind of just keeps on growing without my trying too hard. Being in the pen business, that just tends to happen. Honestly, though, the vast majority of the pens that I have are ones that I wouldn't have nearly as many pens if I didn't do as much video and blogging and photography and stuff as what we do in our company. That's a lot of the reason why I feel so compelled to keep so many of the pens that we end up carrying here, because it helps me amass my knowledge and expertise as a subject matter expert of sorts. But really it helps me for posterity. It helps me when I'm shooting a video and I'm like, oh, we got this, matte black Unica. Oh, you know what? It does kind of look like the charcoal safari. Boom, I have a charcoal safari right here. I can just pull and have access to all these different things. So that's a big help in that way. Or I'm like, oh, you know what, this nib is kind of matte looking, like this other pen that I have, this Stipula Da Vinci. Let me compare those. You know, just having a random assortment of various things like that, especially once pens get discontinued. And I can't just like most pens that I'm carrying regularly, I can go pull them off the shelf and look at them. But in my personal collection, I have, you know, old editions of Lamy Safaris, and I have like our Delta Unica orange celluloid that we did a while ago that we only had 100 of them and that was it. So things like that I would never have otherwise had I not hung on to them. A TWSBI 540, you know, and things like that, TWSBI Micarta, things that are not available anymore. Being able to have those is kind of cool. So that's a lot of the reason why I have them. So the fact that I don't use all of the pens in any type of rotation, which I don't in any specific rotation, doesn't bother me because that's not necessarily what they're always for. They're always there for me when I'm ready to use them. And I got a pretty good memory as far as like how things write and feel and stuff like that. So, you know, using them even not as super regular, I've written with every pen that we've ever carried here because we do it in the nib nook and we do samples and we take pictures and measurements and everything. So I can get to know the pens pretty well as soon as we carry them. It takes a lot of time to do that, but so once I do, just having a pen as a regular reminder, I pull it out every now and then and it all just comes flooding back to me like, oh yeah, I remember this. So I just kind of will do that sometimes, just kind of go through and look at all the pens and just be reminded of what it was like to write with them. So definitely sometimes I do want to directly compare and get a better understanding, and then I'll ink them up and carry them around for a bit, and I'll do that for sure. You know, I carry multiple pen cases around with me at all times of just random pens that I have inked up. You know, I got a 12 pen Visconti case now that I'm carrying around with me, along with an Aston 10 pen case in the front of my bag. So I'll carry around a lot of pens, but even still, it doesn't touch the main collection that I have. So I don't rotate them through with any regularity. So if you don't either, that's okay. I do appreciate them. They're kind of like my babies. You know, I enjoy them all. So even if I am not using all of them super regularly, I have them to have access to. So that's kind of cool. And then if we ever need to do photos, like environmental photos of a pen that we don't have anymore, you can compare and stuff like that. It really comes in handy. With that said, I do still make time, probably more time than you might think, to write with and play with all my pens. I use them very regularly just in my daily work life as I'm taking notes and just writing with them. And certainly anytime I'm doing a video and comparing things, I spend, you know, easily an hour a day kind of doing that stuff, even on some of the busier days. But in general, I keep a daily journal, which I don't write in every day, but for the most part, I try to. That I don't rotate pens through quite as much. I keep one pen like at my nightstand with my journal, and I'll do that. But I'll do that, and right, this month is NaCoWriMo. I'm a little behind because I've been so sick, but I have been writing people back there, so I'll write letters and do things like that. You know, anytime something crazy is going on around here, I'll write sympathy cards, I'll write, you know, thank you notes and stuff like that to our team or to random customers. I'm signing invoices that customers request and things like that. So I do get to use my pens actually fairly regularly. So it's not anything magical, but you know, if it's something that's important to you, you're going to make time for it, honestly. So, you know, I definitely don't have enough time to rotate through everything, but you know, I do get to use the pens regularly, and I enjoy rotating through them and getting to play with them all, and that's a lot of fun. So that's kind of where I stand there. I'm realizing now I didn't officially formally come up with a question of the week. And honestly, I know that we've been talking lately. YouTube actually came out with this new feature to do polls. So that would be kind of interesting. I haven't super detailed looked at how to actually do the polls, but I'm going to throw out a quick poll right now. Excuse me. And what's cool about the YouTube polls, so I'll kind of do this in tandem. I'll do a question of the week. You can comment on it on YouTube or the blog, but also on YouTube, I'll have a poll with a multiple choice kind of situation. But you can also tell what the like real time, what the response has been from the poll. So I'm going to go back to what inks do you feel that everyone should have? Okay. And I'm just going to pick some. So I'm going to say, you know, out of these three, we'll go with three of the inks that you feel that everyone should have. Do you feel that it's Noodler's Black? Do you feel that it is J. Herbin Emerald of Chivor, or Pilot Iroshizuku Konpeki? I'm just kind of picking those three at random. But if you would say that there's one ink that everybody should have, is it Noodler's Black, J. Herbin Emerald of Chivor, or Pilot Hiroshi Konpeki. Vote on the poll on YouTube. That would be kind of cool to see. Or talk in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. So, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you sticking with me, even though I'm coughing a little bit for this rather extended Goulet Q&A, but happy to be back. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to YouTube if you haven't already. You can check out gouletpens.com. I didn't talk a lot about specific products today, but by all means, feel free to shop around. Thanks so much for watching, and right on.